My mother once told me family means sacrifice, but what she really meant was my sacrifice. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask if I could afford it. They just kept asking, and I kept giving. 8 months, over $18,000. I paid the bills, the mortgage, the medicine, until I found a letter, addressed to me, from a bank I never called. That's when I realized they never wanted a daughter. They wanted a lifeline they could pull, over and over, until I snapped. This is how I stopped being their backup plan, and started being free. The phone buzzed again, and again. It skidded slightly across the coffee table, lighting up the room with soft flashes of blue. Elena Carter watched it from the worn armchair she'd bought secondhand, her legs curled beneath her and a blanket draped loosely over her shoulders. The name on the screen blinked for the third time that hour. Mom, then again Dad, and again Jordan, like a carousel of ghosts spinning on a loop. Elena didn't move. She just watched it vibrate, silently counting how many times the people who once told her to leave now seemed desperate to pull her back. 6 months ago, she walked out of her family's home in Colorado Springs. There had been no grand exit, no slamming doors or tearful speeches, just a quiet packing of a weekend bag, a laptop, and an old hoodie she refused to leave behind. The last thing her mother had screamed before Elena turned the doorknob was, "You ungrateful brat, get out and don't come back." And so she did. Not out of spite, not out of drama, but because her soul had finally whispered louder than their expectations. Now, in a small apartment 2 hours north in Boulder, Elena sat in the comfort of solitude. The walls were thin, the radiator hissed occasionally, the light bulb in the kitchen flickered more often than not, but it was hers. No one waiting behind a door with a utility bill and a disappointed sigh, no one keeping score. The phone buzzed again. Mom again. A text popped up. "If you still care about this family, please answer. Jordan is overwhelmed." Elena read it twice. Jordan was always overwhelmed, by responsibility, by mild inconveniences, by the reality that life didn't bend to his whims. She used to be the one who bent for him. Back in those days, she worked at the bank full-time, freelanced on the weekends, and still found time to cook dinner, replace broken appliances, and patch financial holes no one even acknowledged existed. She used to believe that if she gave enough, loved hard enough, they'd finally see her. But all it did was teach them she'd never say no. With a slow motion, Elena turned the phone face down and exhaled. The vibration still echoed in her ears like a phantom limb refusing to believe it had been cut. But this time it didn't hurt. This time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like recovery. Elena pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, leaned back and listened. The low hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing against the window, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Sounds of a life that no longer belonged to anyone but her. The weight hadn't left completely. It still lingered in the curve of her spine and the tightness of her jaw, but it no longer crushed. Because for the first time in years, Elena Carter didn't owe anyone an answer. Not tonight, not ever again. Jordan had always been the golden boy. From the time we were kids, he moved through our house like a prince, carefree, untouchable, while I lived like the scaffolding holding everything up, silently and without thanks. I remember the first time I realized just how deep the imbalance went. I was 14, Jordan was 11. He crashed his electric scooter into Dad's Toyota Tacoma, scraping a deep claw-like mark into the passenger side. My mother screamed when she saw it, and then she turned to me, not Jordan, me. "Elena, did you touch your father's truck?" I still had my volleyball gear on. I had just walked in the door from practice. I hadn't even been home when it happened. Jordan sat at the kitchen counter, chewing on cold pizza, watching cartoons like it was someone else's life. But that was the story of our house. Nothing was ever Jordan's fault. Didn't finish college? He's just not made for traditional academics. No job? The market's tough right now. Racked up debt on 2 credit cards? He's trying. Give him space. Meanwhile, I worked full-time hours while finishing my degree, waitressed late nights, studied for my CPA exam while icing my wrists from carrying heavy trays. When I got my first job offer, no one threw a party. Dad just said, "Good, make sure you keep up with your insurance premiums." They didn't call me brilliant, they called me reliable. I paid for our internet because Dad forgot. I bought light bulbs and toilet paper and filled up the fridge because no one noticed we were out. I unclogged the sink when it backed up, the same night I pulled a 12-hour shift at the firm. No one ever said thank you, because I wasn't doing anything special. I was just being Elena, the one who kept things running, the one who never asked for much. And I believed, honestly I believed, that if I worked harder, loved harder, sacrificed more, maybe they'd see me, maybe they'd be proud, maybe for once I'd be visible. But the truth is, I was never invisible. I was ignored. Ignored not out of malice, but out of habit. Because when someone becomes useful, they stop being seen. I was the family's background noise, the Wi-Fi that always worked, the light switch that flicked on without fail, always there, never noticed, never asked about. I remember the night I came home from a double shift. My legs were numb, my neck was stiff from sitting at a screen. I walked in to find Mom and Jordan laughing on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. There were 3 full pages dedicated to Jordan's childhood, our little star, in bold silver ink. The only picture of me was overexposed, faded, jammed between 2 pages, no caption. I stood there for 3 whole minutes. No one looked up, no one asked if I'd eaten, no one noticed I was there. That night I didn't dream about running away, I dreamed about running toward something. A place where I wouldn't have to beg to be noticed. Where I wouldn't have to earn the bare minimum of affection through exhaustion. A place where I was a person, not a pillar. Because a pillar that holds too much without support eventually cracks. And I was starting to crack. It started with a gas bill. 178 or 42s, due immediately. Mom called me just as I was leaving the office, my badge still dangling from my neck, my feet sore from 3 days of back-to-back deadlines. Elena, I'm sorry to ask, but the gas company's threatening to shut it off. Your dad forgot to pay. Can you just help us this once? This once. That phrase, soft, sweet, deceptive, like a hand on your shoulder that slowly tightens. I transferred the money in the parking lot. She said she'd pay me back. She didn't. A week later, it was the electric bill, then the water, then the Wi-Fi, then a new set of brake pads for Dad's car. Each request came wrapped in guilt. Family helps family. You're the one with a stable income. Jordan's still trying to find his path. No one asked if I was okay, if I could spare it, if I even had enough left after rent, food, student loans, and the sheer cost of keeping myself afloat. I didn't track it at first, because you don't count what you give out of love, right? But love, when exploited, turns into something else. And one night, after yet another midnight Venmo request for just $300 more, I finally opened Excel. I created a spreadsheet. I labeled every column: gas, water, groceries, Jordan's car repair, Dad's prescription refills, overdraft protection fees I didn't even know I'd been covering. Line by line, month by month, transfers, auto payments, one-time emergencies that were anything but rare. When I totaled it, I stared at the number on the screen. 19th, 8/40, 17 in 8 months. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, stunned. I had covered nearly $20,000 in silent contributions, while no one asked if I had eaten dinner. While my mother still sighed that I was cold lately, while Jordan told me I wasn't doing anything special. I printed the spreadsheet and taped it to the wall above my desk. Not as a record of what they owed me. They were never going to pay me back. I did it to stop gaslighting myself, to stop pretending that this was normal, that I was being helpful, when I was actually being drained. That weekend, I tried a new experiment. I said no. Jordan asked if I could drive him to renew his license. I replied gently, I can't. I have plans. An hour later, Mom called. Her voice trembled. You've changed, Elena. You're not the same daughter you used to be. Dad followed with a text. You need to remember your place. Jordan, he messaged, don't act like money makes you special. And that's when I understood, crystal clear. They never saw my help as a gift. They saw it as an obligation. And the moment I stopped giving, I became the villain. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, gave enough, they'd recognize my value. But the second I kept even a sliver of energy, a single dollar, a moment of time for myself, they acted like I'd betrayed them. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the spreadsheet in one hand and my breath in the other. Not angry, not even sad, just awake. For the first time in years, I realized I was not indispensable. I was invisible until I stopped giving. And that spreadsheet? It didn't just tally expenses. It shattered the illusion that I was ever truly loved for being me. It was a Saturday evening in late March. I had just left the office after working through another emergency project, investment analysis for a panicked client. I hadn't eaten lunch. My coffee had gone cold by 10 a.m., but still I stopped by the grocery store, like always. I picked up almond milk for Mom, whole grain bread for Dad, and the organic cookies Jordan liked, the ones no one ever thanked me for. Total, $176.43. I drove 40 minutes south to the house I grew up in, the one I was still helping to keep afloat, from a distance. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the neighborhood rooftops when I pulled into the driveway of 206 Pineview Avenue. The porch light was already on, flickering faintly. The front door wasn't even closed all the way. It hung slightly ajar, like they were expecting me. I nudged it open with my shoulder, hands full of grocery bags. No one greeted me, just the sound of a reality show buzzing from the living room, Jordan's favorite. I set the bags on the kitchen counter. The scent of bleach burned my nose. Mom's usual Saturday ritual, scrubbing every inch of the house, not for cleanliness, but for control. When I turned around, she was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We need to talk," she said flatly. I blinked. I was still in my work clothes, still holding car keys. "I just got off work," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Can we not do this right now?" "No," she snapped. "This has been put off long enough." Dad emerged from the stairwell behind her, silent, cap in hand like always. Jordan didn't move from the couch, didn't look up, didn't pause the TV, just muttered, "Is she here? Huh." I tightened my grip on my bag. "What's going on?" Mom took a breath, the kind people take before delivering something they think is noble. "Elena," she began, "you have a stable job, a car, your own place. Meanwhile, this house is struggling. Your father's tired. Jordan's doing his best. I think it's time you contributed more." I stared at her, at all of them. Something inside me went still. "More?" I said calmly. "I've been paying your electric, gas, water, internet, and part of the mortgage for 2 years. Dad spoke up, voice dull like worn-out rubber. "This is about responsibility, Elena. Family means stepping up. You're an adult now." I turned to him. "Then what's Jordan, a guest?" Finally, Jordan spoke, dropped his controller on the table with a thud. "Don't drag me into this. I never asked for anything. If you want to stop paying, then just stop. Spare us the fake generosity." A laugh escaped me, dry, hollow. "The problem is it wasn't fake. I actually was generous." Mom slammed her palm against the kitchen table. "That's enough. You've grown so selfish, Elena. Living alone's made you arrogant. This house is weeks from foreclosure. Your father lost his insurance. Jordan's student loan got denied. And you're counting dollars like we're just leeches." I looked around the room. The same walls I had painted, the floors I had vacuumed, the roof I had helped keep over their heads. Not once had anyone asked if I had enough to eat, if I was okay, if I had missed rent just to send them money first. "What exactly do you want?" I asked. "My whole paycheck? A new car for Jordan? My retirement account too?" Jordan glared. "You're out of line." I met his gaze and didn't blink. "Out of line? I've worked 60-hour weeks while you nap on that couch. Besides clicking a controller and making demands, what exactly have you done?" Silence. Dad clutched his cap tighter, his voice low. "If you were a responsible daughter, you'd understand." I nodded slowly. My voice didn't crack this time. "So if I stop paying, I stop being your daughter?" No one said a word. I picked up my bag, walked to the front door. Cold wind hit me like truth. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I just said softly, for the first and last time, "Then this house no longer has a daughter named Elena." I didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't even flinch. I walked out of that house on Pineview Avenue with the same bags I'd arrived with, groceries still inside, receipts still crumpled in the side pocket. No one followed me, no one called out, not even Jordan, who couldn't be bothered to lift his head when I walked in. The door clicked shut behind me, not like a goodbye, but like a lock, a seal, a quiet declaration that I was no longer part of a system I never agreed to join. The evening air bit at my cheeks, sharp, but clean. I got in my car, placed the grocery bags on the passenger seat, and sat still for a long moment, hands resting on the wheel, heart neither racing nor breaking. I had always imagined leaving that house would be dramatic, that I'd cry, that someone would beg, that there'd be some final scene that proved my worth, or at least acknowledged my absence. But there was none of that, just the sound of my breath, and for the first time, the absence of noise didn't feel like rejection, it felt like relief. I drove home slower than usual, not out of caution, but reverence. Each passing street lamp felt like punctuation, like a period, marking the end of a sentence I had tried to rewrite for too many years. When I reached my apartment, the hallway light flickered faintly. The smell of lavender oil, the one I'd started using to help me sleep, lingered in the air. I set the grocery bags down on my counter, hung up my coat, poured myself a glass of water. And then I sat, not to scroll or respond or budget or prep for Monday, just to be. In this space that was mine, with no expectations, no passive-aggressive remarks, no unpaid bills slid across the table like accusations. And that's when the shaking started, not from fear, not even from exhaustion, but because, for the first time in years, my body realized it was safe enough to finally let go. Tears didn't come, but breath did, full, steady, healing. I glanced around my little one-bedroom apartment. Everything was mismatched: secondhand coffee table, thrift store curtains, a couch I'd reupholstered myself, a monstera in the corner that had started sprouting a new leaf, despite my neglect. It was imperfect, but it was mine, And here I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to rescue anyone. I didn't have to apologize for needing space. The next morning, I brewed coffee without checking my phone. No missed calls, no texts asking for $80 just until next Friday, no Venmo requests labeled utilities. I ate breakfast without shame, bought myself flowers from the corner market, signed up for a Wednesday night yoga class, started spending Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, tasting samples of honey I didn't need, and smiling at strangers who didn't want anything from me. Silence used to terrify me, because back in that house, silence always came before something loud. Mom's silence meant she was angry. Dad's silence meant judgment. Jordan's silence meant he was planning his next ask. But now, silence meant peace. It meant no one needed me urgently. No one was keeping score. No one was waiting for me to fix their life. I was just Elena, not the provider, not the good daughter, just a woman sitting in the soft afternoon light, learning how to exist outside of crisis. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of healing. 3 days after I walked out of my family's house for the last time, I came home to find a stack of mail tucked under my apartment door. Mostly junk, coupons I'd never use, flyers for carpet cleaning, one handwritten envelope from a coworker's baby shower. And then, one envelope stopped me cold. It was plain, slim, no colors, no gloss, just a return address from a bank in Aurora, and my mother's name, printed in the top left, but in the bottom corner, in small block letters, Elena Carter. My name, their bank, something they hadn't told me about. I opened it. Inside was a third mortgage delinquency notice for 206 Pineview Avenue. 3 months behind, final warning, pre-foreclosure status. The kind of letter you don't forget how to read, even if you wish you could. I stood there in my entryway, coat still on, keys still in hand, just staring. 8 months ago, I was still sending money, still wiring funds every 15th of the month like clockwork. Where had it gone? Why hadn't the mortgage been paid? I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up my banking app. Every transaction was still there. Every transfer, every Venmo, every auto pay I'd set up to help out. Over $18,000 gone. I had covered months of bills, and the house was still on the verge of collapse. Not because I stopped helping, but because they had never used the help for what they said they would. I called the bank. My voice shook, but I kept it steady enough to pass the identity check. Hi, I just received a notice addressed to me, and I'm not on the loan. I just need to confirm what's happening. The rep on the line paused. That mortgage account is 8 months delinquent, he said finally. We sent the final notice 3 weeks ago. 8 months, meaning even when I was still sending money, they weren't paying the bank. I ended the call. Silence filled the room, but this time it wasn't peace. It was betrayal. I had skipped dinners, delayed repairs on my own car, said no to trips, to dates, to anything extra, all so I could help cover that house. And now it was clear. They had lied, again and again and again. The next day I called Jordan. He picked up fast, too fast, like he'd been waiting. Elena, finally, Mom's freaking out. The bank sent another letter. What's your plan? I blinked. My plan? I'm not involved with that house anymore. He scoffed. Don't play dumb. You've been paying the mortgage this whole time. Then you just cut us off? Now we're about to lose everything. Don't you feel any responsibility? My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. What happened to the money I sent? I asked. For 8 straight months? There was a pause, then flatly. I don't know. Mom said you were only covering part of it and the rest came up short. She probably used it. Used it. Used me. I hung up. Mom called 3 minutes later. I didn't answer. Then came the text. Elena, I'm sorry if you felt pressured, but this house is yours too. You grew up here. You'll regret it if we lose it. That was the moment I realized. They never saw me as their daughter. They saw me as their safety net, their silent co-signer, their plan B. I looked down at the letter one last time, then I tore it in half. Not out of rage, but because I had finally accepted the truth. I cannot save a house I don't even live in, and I cannot belong to a family that only remembers me when they need money. I didn't plan to call them. I had said everything I needed to say by walking away. But as I sat in my apartment that night, sipping peppermint tea and staring at the torn mortgage letter on the table, something inside me stirred. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was something cleaner. I wanted to finish the story, not for them, for me. So I picked up my phone, scrolled through old messages, saw the desperate bursts from Mom, the passive-aggressive digs from Dad, and the usual Jordan one-liner. Guess we know who the selfish one is now. I tapped call and put it on speaker. Mom answered on the first ring. Elena? Her voice brightened like we were old friends catching up. Dad was tapping something loudly in the background. Jordan must have been close. I could hear the TV volume dip. I didn't waste time. I just want to ask one thing, I said steady. 8 months ago, I was still sending mortgage payments. Where did that money go? The line went quiet, too quiet. Then Mom's voice, hesitant, fragile. Well, your dad needed dental work, and Jordan's car, you know how it is. The water heater broke, groceries, gas, it all adds up. I closed my eyes. You mean you spent the money I sent for the mortgage on everything but the mortgage? Dad jumped in, voice hard. We didn't mean for it to happen, Elena, but you walked out. Things spiraled after that. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. No, if I'd stayed, you still would have lied, still would have spent what wasn't yours, still would have expected me to clean up the mess. Mom's tone snapped. Don't talk like that. I carried you for 9 months. We raised you, and now, when we're in trouble, you just turn your back? No, I said calmly. I'm not turning my back. I'm finally seeing clearly. A long pause, then Jordan's voice in the background. You think you're better than us now? Without this family, you'd be nothing. I let the words hang, let them echo. And then softly, firmly, no, I'm not better because I walked away. I'm better because I survived staying so long. Another silence, this one heavier. I continued, I'm not your insurance policy. I'm not your mortgage relief fund. I'm not your last-minute fix when things fall apart. Mom started crying. Dad muttered something under his breath. Jordan? He didn't say another word. I wish you all the best, I said, not out of sarcasm, but truth. From now on, you own your choices. And if anyone asks why I cut ties, tell them this. You spent the money I sent. You lied about where it went. And you made me feel like love only counted when it came with a deposit slip. I hung up. My hand didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. I opened my contacts app, blocked Mom, blocked Dad, blocked Jordan. Not out of hate, but out of healing. Then I sent one final message in the family group chat. I'm not your backup plan anymore. Goodbye. And I left the group. My phone went still. No more late-night buzzes. No more requests disguised as checking in. Just stillness. And for the first time in my adult life, I welcomed it. Because closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, clean, unapologetic, and irreversible. Sometimes the hardest decision isn't walking away. It's accepting that they were never holding the door open for you to return. Elena's story is not just about setting boundaries. It's about remembering that love without respect is just control in disguise. You don't owe anyone your health, your peace, or your savings, just to be called a good daughter. What you owe is honesty to yourself. And if you've ever felt like the backbone of a family that never even looked you in the eye, know this, you're not alone. Here on Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, we share stories like Elena's, stories of quiet strength, silent battles, and the kind of healing that doesn't need applause. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Tell us your version of walking away, and don't forget to subscribe, because someone out there needs your voice to find their own.